In the heart of Brisbane, a mystery still burns, one that begins not with a scream, but with silence and ends with fire. March 2008. A quiet road near Mount Coot-tha. A car engulfed in flames, the air thick with smoke and something unspoken. The beginning of a story that would haunt Australia for years. They called her Melissa Lewis, a brilliant attorney, a woman with everything to live for. But in the weeks before her death, those who knew her best said something had changed. She looked over her shoulder more often. She deleted messages. And she told one friend, "If anything happens to me, tell them I knew." Police would later label it a crime of passion. The evidence said jealousy. But the shadows whispered something else entirely, that Melissa had stumbled onto a secret meant to stay hidden. Her car burned. Her files vanished. And the one person who could tell us what really happened was gone. Tonight, we reopen the case. Not to solve it, but to understand it. To ask the questions no one wanted to ask. Who was Melissa Lewis really afraid of? What truth was she about to reveal? And what kind of secret burns hot enough to take a life? Before we begin, remember, every mystery we uncover depends on you, our viewers, to help keep curiosity alive. So if you love exploring the shadows and questioning what lies beneath, subscribe to Mystery Vault 80. Don't just watch, engage. Like, share, and comment your theories below. We welcome your insights, your debates, and yes, even your criticism. Every question you ask helps us dig deeper, and every voice here helps us find the truth hidden in the dark. Now, let's open the vault. The day the flames rose. Wide aerial drone shot of a lonely Queensland road, dusk settling in. The camera pans to a burning vehicle, flames licking the dark sky as sirens wail in the distance. On a quiet March morning in Brisbane, 2008, a passerby noticed smoke rising from the bushland off a rural road in Clayfield. Firefighters rushed to the scene, expecting a simple vehicle fire. What they found instead was a nightmare. Inside the charred remains of a red Mazda sedan lay a body, burned beyond recognition. Within hours, the car was confirmed to belong to Melissa Lewis, a promising lawyer at a prestigious law firm, a young woman known for her sharp intellect, independence, and radiant energy. But now she was gone. Who could want Melissa dead? Why such a brutal method? A fire meant to erase her completely. And what dark truths were hiding behind her successful career and calm smile? Tonight, we begin unraveling one of Queensland's most chilling modern tragedies. A story of ambition, betrayal, and flames that burned far beyond the bushland where her body was found. This is the Melissa Lewis murder, or, as some call it, the woman who vanished in flames. Before we dive deep into this haunting case, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Whether you're watching on at Dark Truth 25 for the true crime breakdown, or at Mystery Vault 80 for the mysterious twist behind the investigation. Hit like, share your thoughts in the comments, and turn on notifications, because this is just the beginning of a story that will leave you questioning everything. The life and ambition of Melissa Lewis. Opening visual cue. Soft instrumental music fades in. A slow piano under photos of Melissa Lewis, bright-eyed, poised, confident in her courtroom attire. Superimposed text. Before the fire, there was a future. To understand the tragedy, we must first understand the woman behind the name, Melissa Lewis. Born in the mid-1970s in Queensland, Melissa was known early on for her intelligence and quiet determination. Friends described her as driven but kind, the kind of person who didn't just want success, she wanted to earn it. After completing her law degree at the University of Queensland, she quickly made her mark in Brisbane's tight-knit legal world. By her early 30s, she had become a respected lawyer at the prestigious firm Mullaba Chambers, where she handled corporate litigation and estate cases. For many, Melissa's life looked enviable, a successful career, a comfortable lifestyle, and an ever-growing network of professional friends. But behind her calm smile, there were signs that not everything was perfect. Colleagues would later say that, in the weeks before her death, Melissa seemed unusually tense. She often stayed late at the office, far later than most. Sometimes, co-workers found her alone, staring at files with a distracted expression. She confided in one close friend that she was under pressure at work, that the atmosphere had grown toxic. But she didn't elaborate. As one coworker recalled, Melissa wasn't the kind to overshare. If something was wrong, she would bury it behind professionalism. Low hum of suspenseful strings begins under the narration. That professionalism, however, came at a price. Around her, a quiet storm was brewing. Corporate rivalries, internal disputes, and rumors of betrayal within the law firm she'd helped build. She was caught between loyalty and truth, between what she knew and what she feared would be exposed. Just days before her disappearance, Melissa reportedly had a heated conversation in the firm's parking lot. The details of that discussion were never made public, but it was clear something had shifted. Friends noticed her becoming withdrawn. Emails went unanswered. Her once vibrant demeanor turned cautious, as though she knew something dangerous was coming. On March 20th, 2008, Melissa left her office for the last time. She told her colleagues she had errands to run and would return the next morning. But she never did. The next time anyone saw her, she was gone, her car engulfed in flames, her life erased by fire. Every life leaves behind questions. But in Melissa's case, those questions burned as fiercely as the flames that consumed her car. Who was she meeting that night? Was it personal or professional? And did she know that the truth she carried about her firm or someone inside it could cost her everything? If you're following this case because you believe justice deserves a voice, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and share it to keep Melissa's story alive. The truth was almost buried, but together, we can uncover what really happened. Camera slowly zooms in on a single framed photo of Melissa smiling. The frame begins to distort under flickering light. Fade to black. Text on screen. Next, Chapter 3, The Last Day. The final 24 hours. Low rumbling bass fades under aerial footage of Brisbane at dusk. Glowing streetlights. The hum of traffic. The camera gliding toward a high-rise law office. Text fades in. March 20th, 2008, the last day. On the surface, March 20th was like any other workday for Melissa Lewis. She arrived early at her firm in Brisbane, coffee in hand, her expression calm but focused. Colleagues recalled seeing her at her desk, handling paperwork and returning calls. But beneath the ordinary rhythm of the day, something was off. Around mid-morning, Melissa stepped out for a brief walk. A coworker remembered her, saying she needed fresh air. When she returned, she looked pale, unsettled. Some speculate she had received a message or phone call that disturbed her, though no such record was ever found. By noon, her behavior had grown quieter, more distracted. A paralegal who spoke to her said Melissa seemed distant, like her mind was somewhere else entirely. Then, at 3:30 p.m., she made her last confirmed phone call to a family member, assuring them she'd be home late that evening. Her voice sounded normal, calm, professional, but as we now know, it would be the last time anyone heard her alive. Just before 5 p.m., she gathered a few files, packed her briefcase, and left the office. Security footage captured her walking through the lobby of the building, alone, wearing a dark jacket and carrying her bag over her shoulder. Outside, the sun was dipping behind the skyline. Brisbane's traffic buzzed. Life went on, as Melissa Lewis quietly disappeared into the night. That night, her friends tried to reach her. No response. Her colleagues assumed she was resting after a long day. But when she didn't show up for work the next morning, alarm bells rang immediately. Melissa was never late and never uncontactable. By mid-morning, police were notified. A missing person report was filed. And within hours, a discovery would shatter the illusion of normalcy forever. At approximately 7 a.m., a passerby noticed smoke coming from a dirt track near Mount Coot-tha, just outside Brisbane. When authorities arrived, they found a vehicle burned beyond recognition. Inside that charred wreck, they made a chilling discovery: human remains. It took hours before investigators could confirm the identity. But by afternoon, it was official. The body inside the burned car belonged to Melissa Lewis. Her life, once filled with promise, had ended in an inferno, and with it, any sense of safety among those who knew her. show archival-style overlays, breaking news headlines, blurred press footage, detectives entering cordoned areas. A newscaster voice faintly echoes. A prominent Brisbane lawyer found dead in her burned vehicle. Who would want to kill Melissa Lewis, and why? Investigators were baffled. There are no signs of robbery, no forced entry, and no clear motive. Her car had been deliberately set alight, suggesting someone wanted the evidence erased. But in their attempt to destroy the truth, they left behind a trail of questions that refused to die. The day Melissa vanished was more than just her last. It was the start of a long and haunting puzzle. A puzzle that would uncover greed, betrayal, and secrets buried deep within Brisbane's elite legal circles. And somewhere in that maze of ambition lay the truth about who ended her life and why. If you believe every victim deserves their story told, help us keep Melissa's voice alive. Tap like, subscribe, and share this video to bring more eyes to this case, because the truth still matters. The fire and the forensics, what the flames try to hide. A cold morning mist drifts through eucalyptus trees. The camera moves toward a remote dirt path. Police lights flash red and blue in the distance. The faint crackle of cooling embers fades into the sound of camera shutters. On-screen text. Mount Coot-tha, March 21st, 2008. The fire that consumed Melissa Lewis's car burned at nearly 800 degrees Celsius, enough to melt metal and erase evidence. But as investigators soon discovered, the flames didn't destroy everything. Beneath the charred wreckage lay fragments that would tell a story of violence, fear, and perhaps betrayal. It was early morning when the first forensic officers arrived at the scene. The air still smelled of gasoline and ash. Birds circled above the treetops as investigators carefully taped off the area. Detectives from the Queensland Police Homicide Squad began their grim task to determine not only how Melissa had died, but why. From the start, the signs were clear. This wasn't an accident. The car's doors had been locked from the outside, and the fire was likely started deliberately. Investigators found traces of an accelerant, believed to be petrol, soaked into the soil around the vehicle. Someone had wanted Melissa Lewis to vanish, not just in life, but in evidence. But fire doesn't only destroy, it also reveals. Beneath the ash, forensic teams discovered a melted keyring, a half-charred mobile phone battery, and fragments of jewelry, later identified by family members as Melissa's. Each item told a quiet story. She hadn't just been left here, she'd been brought here. White-suited investigators dusting burnt surfaces. Close-ups of camera flashes. Hands lifting small evidence bags with tweezers. Inside the car, the damage was catastrophic. Yet forensic anthropologists were able to recover enough remains to determine one crucial fact. Melissa Lewis had died before the fire began. There were signs of blunt force trauma. Her skull fractured, consistent with a violent assault. Whoever killed her had staged the fire to conceal the crime. Fade between sketches of the crime scene and slow-motion footage of burning paper, symbolic of destroyed truth. This revelation changed everything. The police now knew they were dealing with a calculated murder, not a random act. But that only deepened the questions. Who could have known where she would be that night? Who had accessed her car? And, most disturbingly, who wanted her silenced? A well-known Brisbane lawyer has been found dead in what police are describing as a suspicious vehicle fire. Reporters gathered outside the law firm as speculation spread. Rumors swirled of professional jealousy, financial disputes, and secret conflicts hidden behind the polished facade of the firm. As investigators sifted through the ashes, they began to realize that Melissa's life wasn't as picture-perfect as it seemed. Her final weeks had been filled with tension. Unreturned calls, late-night emails, and a growing unease that she couldn't quite explain. And among her colleagues, whispers began to emerge. Melissa had secrets, and not the kind you share. A close-up of flickering fire transforms into the glow of a computer screen displaying confidential documents. Forensics continued to work around the clock. Every piece of debris was cataloged, photographed, and tested. Yet, crucially, Melissa's phone records from the night she vanished showed several missing entries. Calls had been deleted. Messages wiped. Someone had gone to great lengths to cover their tracks. Then a break. Investigators found traces of fibers and paint residue on the car's frame, suggesting another vehicle may have come into contact with it before it was burned. This led detectives to believe Melissa was ambushed, possibly followed, attacked, and then driven to the site where the car was set ablaze. Every murder scene tells a story, but in Melissa's case, that story was written in smoke. A crime of anger or of silence. A warning or revenge. As police combed the ashes, one chilling truth became clear. Whoever killed Melissa Lewis knew her personally. The embers fade to black. A single spark flickers into the shape of a question mark. Text appears. Next, Chapter 5, The Inner Circle. Soft heartbeat sound echoes as the screen fades. The burn car by the highway. It was early morning in Johannesburg, 2008. The sun had barely broken over the skyline when a motorist noticed something strange. A thin trail of smoke rising from the side of the road. As he drew closer, the smell of burning rubber and metal filled the air. Then came the unmistakable odor of something far worse. Burnt flesh. There, in the bushes off Windsor Way, lay a BMW engulfed in flames. And inside it, the charred remains of a woman who, just hours earlier, was a respected attorney, colleague, and friend. Her name was Melissa Lewis, a partner at a prestigious South African law firm. And that morning, her name would become the headline of a case that shocked the nation. When police and forensic teams arrived, the car was still smoldering. The heat had melted the tires into the soil and warped the license plate. Investigators could barely make out the make and model. But through the fire's devastation, they discovered a badge that confirmed it belonged to Bowman Gilfillan, the law firm where Melissa worked. Inside, the victim's body was burned beyond recognition. It took forensic dental records to confirm what many had already feared. The woman inside was indeed Melissa Lewis. This was no accident. The fuel traces on the car, the scorch patterns on the ground, all pointed to one conclusion. Someone had set the fire deliberately. The investigation unfolds. Detectives began to piece together her final hours. Melissa had left work the previous afternoon, driving her company car, but she never made it home. Her phone went dead around 6 p.m., calls from her husband went unanswered. When she didn't arrive at her daughter's school the next morning, alarms went off. Her colleagues were stunned. She was known for being punctual, organized, and deeply responsible. By midday, her car was found, and the horrific discovery confirmed everyone's worst nightmare. Community shock and fear. The Johannesburg community went into collective shock. News of Melissa's death spread quickly. This wasn't a random street crime. It was targeted, deliberate, and chillingly calculated. Friends described her as a woman of elegance and principle, with no known enemies. But in the world of corporate law, power struggles and internal rivalries were nothing new. And so, investigators began digging, not only into Melissa's life, but also into the web of people who surrounded her at the firm. A trail of clues. Forensic experts examined the burnt vehicle meticulously. They found faint traces of accelerant, possibly petrol. They also discovered that the fire had been started from the driver's side, a signature of someone trying to ensure the victim couldn't escape. Nearby surveillance footage captured a dark-colored sedan following Melissa's car minutes before her phone went offline. But the biggest clue came from her office, a missing laptop and file folder. Whatever was in those documents might have been the motive behind her murder. Suspicion within the firm. Investigators began interviewing Melissa's coworkers, and one name kept surfacing. Nicole, a former colleague and close friend turned rival. The relationship between the two had reportedly soured after professional disagreements, power struggles, and whispers of betrayal within their law practice. When police learned that Nicole had been seen near Melissa's route home that evening, suspicion deepened. Then came the shocker. Nicole was arrested. But the story didn't end there, because even behind bars, questions remained. Did she act alone? Or was there someone else pulling the strings? As detectives closed in on their prime suspect, the case took a darker turn. One that would expose not only jealousy and betrayal, but a brutal plan forged in fire. If this story of betrayal and justice hits you hard, take a moment to like this video. It helps more people uncover the truth behind cases like Melissa's. Don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into real crimes that changed lives forever. The deeper we go, the stranger this case becomes. What if this wasn't just revenge, but something far darker? Hit subscribe, drop your theories in the comments, and let's piece together the mystery, one clue at a time. The arrest and the confession. After days of intense questioning, sleepless nights, and mounting pressure from the public, investigators finally made a move that would change everything. On March 21st, 2008, police entered a quiet suburban home in Johannesburg. The woman inside was calm, composed, almost too calm for someone about to be accused of murder. Her name, Nicole, Melissa Lewis's close friend and former colleague. To the world, they were professional allies, two ambitious attorneys making waves in a top-tier law firm. But behind that polished image lay secrets, resentment, and a storm that had been brewing for months. The tension behind the office walls. Nicole and Melissa had once shared lunches, laughter, and long nights preparing corporate cases together. But something shifted. Rumors within Bowman Gilfillan attorneys whispered of jealousy, professional rivalry, and betrayal. Melissa was being promoted, a move that could have placed her above Nicole in rank. There were also murmurs that Melissa had uncovered questionable transactions tied to a side business Nicole was involved in, something she planned to report. If true, that meant Melissa wasn't just a colleague anymore. She was a threat. The arrest. Detectives had connected Nicole to Melissa's final movements through cell tower triangulation and witness statements, placing her near the route where Melissa disappeared. When police arrived at Nicole's residence, they found several items that raised eyebrows. Traces of fuel in her garage, a pair of gloves with faint chemical residue, and most damning of all, Melissa's missing office laptop, hidden beneath a false bottom in a storage bin. Nicole was immediately arrested and charged with kidnapping, murder, and arson. Her initial reaction? A quiet, almost rehearsed denial. Interrogation. The calm before the storm. For hours, Nicole sat across from detectives in a small, cold interrogation room. Every question was met with composure. She maintained her innocence, insisting that she and Melissa had parted ways amicably, that she had nothing to do with the crime. But the evidence told a different story. When forensic teams matched fuel samples from Nicole's home to the accelerant used on Melissa's car, the silence broke. Nicole's mask slipped. The confession. At first, it was a whisper, then a tremble. Finally, a flood. Nicole admitted to meeting Melissa on the evening of her disappearance. She claimed it was only to talk things through, to clear the air about professional tension. But according to her own confession, the confrontation escalated. Words turned to shouting, then violence. Nicole said she panicked after Melissa was injured and made a terrible mistake. The fire, she insisted, was to hide the evidence. She never thought it would go this far. The public reaction. When the confession broke, South Africans were stunned. The story of two successful women, one murdered, the other accused, captivated the nation. It wasn't just another crime. It was a tragedy of friendship turned fatal, ambition turned obsession. The case made headlines across newspapers, TV, and radio. Attorney charged in friend's murder. Flames of betrayal. The details were almost too haunting to believe. People asked, how could someone so intelligent, so poised, commit such a heinous act? And yet, some weren't convinced. Because Nicole's confession, though emotional, was missing details. Too vague, too neat. Had she really acted alone? Theories began to form. As investigators dug deeper, inconsistencies emerged. The autopsy report suggested Melissa might have been unconscious before the fire was set, not dead. Security footage hinted at another vehicle near the crime scene that night, one not linked to Nicole. And financial records from Nicole's accounts revealed unusual transfers, possibly payments to a third party. So the question loomed, was this truly a crime of passion or part of a larger, darker conspiracy? Nicole's confession might have shocked South Africa, but for detectives, it was far from closure. The pieces didn't fit. Something, or someone, was still missing from the puzzle. What do you think? Was Nicole's confession genuine, or was she protecting someone else? Drop your thoughts below, and if you believe every story deserves to be told, hit that like button and subscribe for more true crime deep dives every week. The trial, truth or performance? When the trial of Nicole Lewis's alleged killer began, South Africa held its breath. The nation that had followed every twist and headline now turned its eyes toward the courtroom, a stage where justice and deception danced dangerously close together. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Cameras flashed. Protesters demanded justice for Melissa. Others whispered doubts, wondering if the real truth had been buried with her. Nicole arrived each day calm, poised, almost cold. Dressed in black, her expression never broke. To some, she looked guilty. To others, she looked broken. But to everyone watching, she looked mysterious. Inside the courtroom, the prosecution's case was methodical, deliberate, and devastating. They painted a picture of a jealous, desperate woman, one whose career was slipping, whose pride had been wounded, and whose rage finally erupted. They presented evidence of fuel residue, phone records, and that chilling confession. The jury sat in silence as the images of Melissa's burned car flashed on the screen, the haunting reminder of how far human anger can go. But the defense had a different story. Nicole's lawyer argued that her confession had been coerced, taken after sleepless hours of pressure and emotional collapse. They suggested police had jumped to conclusions, eager to close a high-profile case. And perhaps most shockingly, the defense hinted that someone else could have been involved, someone with more to lose if Melissa's investigations ever came to light. Unraveling the hidden layers. Courtroom whispers spoke of corporate secrets, of shady business dealings and internal corruption that Melissa may have stumbled upon. There were documents, half-redacted, heavily guarded, suggesting that Melissa had been preparing to expose irregularities within her firm. If true, that could mean her death wasn't just personal, it was professional retaliation. A message sent in fire and fear. The witnesses. Day after day, the courtroom filled with faces, colleagues, friends, experts, and even family members. Melissa's sister took the stand, her voice trembling as she described their final phone call. She told me she was scared, that she felt someone was following her. I told her to go to the police. She said she didn't want to make it worse. Then came a surprise witness, a private investigator hired by a client of the firm, who testified that he'd seen suspicious vehicles near Melissa's office before her disappearance. The implication was clear. This case wasn't just about jealousy. It was about power. The breakdown. As the trial wore on, Nicole's composure began to crack. During cross-examination, she was asked one simple question that echoed through the courtroom. Did you kill Melissa Lewis? There was a pause. Her eyes filled with tears. Her lips trembled. I didn't mean to, she whispered. But she wouldn't stop. The silence that followed was suffocating. Was it a confession or a desperate attempt to control the narrative one last time? The media circus. Outside, the story took on a life of its own. Talk shows debated guilt versus innocence. Tabloids published theories, some wild, some plausible. Social media burned with hashtags. The trial had become more than a murder case. It was a national obsession. People weren't just searching for justice. They were searching for meaning in a story that felt both human and horrifying. Verdict day. After weeks of testimony, arguments, and emotional breakdowns, the jury returned. The courtroom was silent, the kind of silence that feels like time itself has stopped. The judge asked, "Have you reached a verdict?" The foreperson nodded. "We have, Your Honor. We find the defendant guilty." Gasps filled the room. Nicole's face went pale, her body still. No tears, no outburst, just silence. Outside, the crowd erupted, some in relief, others in disbelief. But deep down, a question lingered. If justice had truly been served, why did it still feel like part of the truth was missing? Sometimes justice gives answers, and sometimes it only opens more questions. What do you believe truly happened to Melissa Lewis? Was this the act of one woman, or the cover-up of something much darker? Share your thoughts below, and if you believe the truth deserves to be uncovered, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to keep this story alive. After the verdict, justice or illusion? When the gavel struck and the word guilty echoed across the courtroom, the air outside seemed to shift. After months of investigation, endless headlines, and public outrage, justice had, at least officially, been served. But as the crowds dispersed, the cameras dimmed, and the news cycle moved on, something about the Melissa Lewis murder case refused to rest. Because behind the verdict lay a trail of contradictions, unanswered questions, and whispers that refused to fade. For some, this was justice delivered. For others, it was just a performance of closure. The sentence. The judge called it a crime born of jealousy, betrayal, and unrestrained anger. Nicole was sentenced to 20 years to life in prison, with no chance of parole for at least 15 years. As the sentence was read, she remained expressionless. No apology, no reaction, just the same haunting composure she carried from the moment she was arrested. Outside the courthouse, Melissa's family wept. Reporters shouted for statements, but her father's response said it all. We don't feel justice. We feel loss. And that's something no verdict can fix. The public's divided reaction. The case dominated South African headlines for months, and even after sentencing, the public remained divided. Was Nicole truly the only one responsible? Or had the trial simply tied up loose ends to satisfy public pressure? Talk radio callers debated endlessly. She confessed. That's enough. But what about the second vehicle spotted that night? If this was about money or corporate secrets, why wasn't anyone else charged? Online forums and blogs exploded with theories, some pointing fingers at powerful figures in Melissa's firm, others suggesting that Nicole had taken the fall for someone more influential. The story had become more than a case. It was now a national riddle. The missing pieces. Even as Nicole served her sentence, police quietly reopened portions of the investigation. They revisited financial records, examined burn patterns, and retested DNA samples that had been inconclusive years earlier. One piece of new evidence caught attention. A partial fingerprint found on a piece of burned metal near Melissa's car, one that didn't match Nicole or Melissa. Another clue emerged when a retired detective revealed that a witness statement had been omitted from the official record. That statement described two figures near the site on the night of the fire, not one. Suddenly, what was once considered a closed case began to unravel again, quietly, in the shadows. Nicole's silence behind bars. From her prison cell, Nicole refused all interviews. No letters, no public statements. But one journalist who corresponded with her anonymously claimed she wrote a single chilling line. "You'll never understand. I wasn't the only one." That sentence reignited everything. If she wasn't alone, who else was involved? And if there were others, how far would they go to stay hidden? The firm under scrutiny. As public pressure mounted, Bowman Gilfillan, the firm where Melissa and Nicole worked, found itself under the microscope. Internal audits revealed irregular financial activities and questionable partnerships that matched Melissa's rumored investigations. The timing was haunting. Melissa was killed days before she was scheduled to present her findings to senior partners. Coincidence? Or conspiracy? Some believe Melissa's death had silenced her before she could expose corruption within the firm. Others insisted it was pure coincidence, a tragic personal conflict twisted by circumstance. But as journalists dug deeper, one thing became clear. Too many powerful names had too much to lose if the truth ever surfaced. The legacy of Melissa Lewis. For Melissa's family, life became a slow rebuild. Her parents established a foundation in her name to support women in law and fund investigations into unsolved cases involving gender-based violence. Her sister once said in an interview, "Melissa wanted truth more than anything. So if we can't find it for her, we'll help others find theirs." Even now, years later, the case remains one of South Africa's most haunting stories, not only because of the brutality of the act, but because it reminds the world how easily ambition, trust, and betrayal can intertwine in tragedy. The verdict gave the illusion of closure, but deep down, the shadow of doubt still lingers over Johannesburg. Every few years, new evidence, new whispers, and new theories surface, each one reigniting the flame of curiosity that refuses to burn out. Justice may close a case, the narrator says softly, but it doesn't always tell the truth. And somewhere out there, in a file buried under layers of red tape, the real story of what happened to Melissa Lewis might still be waiting to be uncovered. Some stories end in verdicts. Others end in silence. Which one do you believe this was? Share your thoughts below. And if you believe every truth deserves light, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to keep the search for answers alive. Theories, secrets, and the shadows that remain. Years after the verdict, one truth remained. People still didn't believe the full story had been told. The flames that consumed Melissa Lewis's car may have been extinguished long ago, but the fire of suspicion, the quiet questions whispered in offices, courtrooms, and homes across South Africa, never truly died out. Everyone had a theory. Everyone had a version. But beneath all the noise, one question continued to haunt the case. Was Nicole really the only one responsible, or just the easiest one to blame? The corporate cover-up. Some of Melissa's former colleagues quietly admitted that before her death, she had been digging into irregular financial dealings within the firm. Documents later surfaced suggesting undisclosed accounts, off-record transactions, and overseas payments, all linked to high-profile clients with political connections. Melissa's own notes, recovered from her home computer, contained one chilling line. "If I disappear, start with the files in drawer 3. That drawer, when searched, was empty. The theory grew that Melissa had discovered something too dangerous, and her death had been arranged to silence her before she could expose it. Nicole, who had access, opportunity, and motive, became the perfect scapegoat. Tied up neatly, give the public their villain, and bury the rest. That's how one investigator described it years later. Theory 2, the friend betrayed. Another theory, more personal, more emotional, centers on a broken friendship and a spiral of jealousy. Nicole and Melissa weren't just colleagues. They were once inseparable, friends who shared secrets, dreams, and victories. But as Melissa's career began to rise, Nicole's stagnated. Tensions over recognition and success quietly eroded their bond. Some claim Melissa had even considered exposing Nicole's unethical side hustles, putting her job and reputation at risk. If true, the crime may not have been premeditated, just a confrontation that spun out of control. A single argument that ended in panic, fear, and fire. But that explanation, though tragic, felt too simple for many. Too convenient for a case that had already proved to be anything but. Theory 3, the missing driver. One of the most persistent mysteries came from that forgotten piece of evidence, the second vehicle seen near the crime scene. Witnesses described headlights flickering in the distance just before the fire began. Yet, police never identified the car or its driver. Was it an accomplice, a bystander, or someone who came later to make sure the job was finished? To this day, no clear answer exists, and the footage from nearby traffic cameras, which might have confirmed the truth, was corrupted and later deleted. A coincidence or a cover-up? Theory 4, the ghost file. In 2013, an investigative journalist claimed to have received a USB drive from an anonymous source. On it were fragments of documents, scanned memos, legal drafts, and encrypted messages allegedly tied to Melissa's firm. One file labeled Client 54, urgent, referenced offshore accounts and political funding irregularities, the kind of thing that could destroy reputations overnight. But before the journalist could verify the data, the drive was stolen from his car. Nothing else was taken. Theory 5, the innocent confession. Perhaps the most chilling theory is psychological. Some criminologists believe Nicole's confession wasn't the truth, but the result of coercion, exhaustion, and guilt over something else entirely. According to this theory, she may not have killed Melissa, but felt responsible for introducing her to dangerous people or situations that ultimately led to her death. Confessing, even falsely, could have been her way of controlling the uncontrollable. As one forensic psychologist said, Confessions aren't always about guilt. Sometimes they're about survival. Public obsession and internet detectives. Over time, online sleuths from Reddit threads to YouTube channels began dissecting every angle, frame by frame, document by document. Amateur investigators traced license plates, analyzed courtroom footage, and even built digital timelines of Melissa's last known movements. Some uncovered contradictions in the police timeline. Others noted missing phone logs. In the age of information, Melissa Lewis's murder became more than a story. It became a digital puzzle that millions tried to solve. The shadow that won't fade. Every theory offered a piece of truth, but none offered the whole truth. The case of Melissa Lewis sits uneasily between fact and mystery. The kind of story that resists resolution, that forces us to ask hard questions about power, privilege, and the limits of justice. When truth burns, who dares to hold it? The tragedy wasn't just in Melissa's death. It was in how easily truth can vanish in the smoke. Everyone has a theory, but only one truth. Which version do you believe? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe every mystery deserves a voice, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so stories like this one are never forgotten. Echoes of the past. The case that refuses to die. Years may pass, but the dead never truly rest when their story is unfinished. It's been over a decade since the murder of Melissa Lewis, the respected lawyer whose life ended in a blaze of terror inside her own car. But even now, her story continues to echo through the halls of South African law, whispered among old colleagues, police veterans, and journalists who still believe something was left unsolved. The courtroom verdict gave the country closure. But justice, the truth, remains uncertain. The appeal that shook the system. In 2011, nearly 2 years after Nicole's conviction, her defense team filed a formal appeal, claiming the evidence had been misrepresented. They argued that crucial forensic details, including burn patterns, mobile tower data, and timeline inconsistencies, were ignored in favor of a narrative of convenience. The appeal was denied. But leaked court documents later revealed that 2 forensic analysts on the case had expressed internal disagreement about the time of death and the ignition source of the fire. One believed Melissa was already dead before the car was set ablaze. The other insisted she was alive, unconscious, when the flames began. A haunting question still divides investigators today. Was the fire the weapon, or the cover-up? Unsealed files and the missing envelope. In 2016, a journalist from the Sunday Times published an investigative piece titled "The File That Never Made It to Court." The report exposed that an unsealed brown envelope had been logged as evidence, but never presented in trial. Inside were handwritten notes from Melissa's office, listing dates, phone numbers, and one name. ZP, urgent meeting. That name, ZP, was later linked to a major political donor whose firm had ongoing dealings with Melissa's law office. The envelope vanished from evidence storage within days of the article being published. To this day, no one knows who signed it out. Digital ghosts, Melissa's recovered emails. A breakthrough came in 2019 when cyberforensic experts managed to recover fragments of Melissa's deleted emails from an archive drive. One message, sent just 3 days before her death, read, "If anything happens, it won't be an accident. They know I'm asking questions." The email was addressed to a confidential source in Johannesburg. The recipient's identity remains redacted, protected under investigative privilege. For a moment, it seemed like the case might reopen. But by 2020, the renewed interest faded again, drowned out by bigger headlines, newer scandals, and the quiet fatigue of a public that had moved on. The investigator who wouldn't let go, Detective Samuel Makona, now retired, was one of the original officers assigned to the Lewis case. In a rare 2023 interview, he admitted, "There were things we couldn't touch. Pressure came from above. Every time we got close to something real, the order came to stand down." When asked if he believed Nicole was guilty, he paused for several seconds before saying, "She was involved, but she wasn't alone." That quote reignited public interest, and with it, a new wave of citizen-led research online. The digital revival, the case online. TikTok, Reddit, and YouTube documentaries began reviving Melissa's case. Old files, forgotten witness statements, and timeline maps resurfaced, analyzed by a new generation of digital detectives. Creators began comparing police evidence to satellite maps and time-stamped CCTV. One researcher even discovered that the car fire's official location didn't match the GPS coordinates listed in the police log. That error, minor to some, reignited theories of staged scenes and falsified timelines. If they could misplace a body by a few meters, one creator said, what else did they get wrong? Family, faith, and unanswered questions. Melissa's family continues to fight for truth. Her brother, in a 2024 documentary, said, they keep calling it a tragedy, but a tragedy is an accident. This was a message. Each year, on the anniversary of her death, her family gathers at the same site where her car was found, laying fresh flowers where the fire once burned. In those moments, silence fills the air. Not peace, just waiting. A case that won't fade away. What happened to Melissa Lewis wasn't just a story of jealousy or betrayal. It became a mirror to a nation's hidden undercurrents: power, corruption, and fear. For every answer uncovered, two new questions emerge. And even now, behind the polished glass of corporate offices and government corridors, people still whisper her name. She knew too much. She trusted the wrong person. She was silenced. The truth lies somewhere between them, frozen in the ashes of that car, waiting for the one person brave enough to speak. The hidden connections, following the money trail. When a crime seems personal, it's easy to overlook the paper trail. But sometimes, the motive isn't written in blood, it's buried in numbers. By the time the police investigation into Melissa Lewis's murder had settled, the public believed they knew the story: jealousy, rage, betrayal. The perfect cocktail for murder. But what if there was something beneath that narrative? Something Melissa herself was beginning to uncover before she was silenced? The firm and the fortune. Melissa Lewis was more than a talented lawyer. She was one of the senior partners at Bowman Gilfillan Attorneys, one of South Africa's most powerful law firms. Her department handled multi-million rand mergers, property disputes, and corporate compliance for some of the country's largest entities. Among those clients were two major names. A construction conglomerate later investigated for illegal tender contracts that a political fund tied to campaign donations traced to offshore accounts. Melissa's access to internal files gave her a front-row seat to how money flowed, and more importantly, how it disappeared. The strange transaction. In the weeks before her death, Melissa allegedly flagged a series of unaccounted transactions totaling nearly $40 million, routed through shell companies in Mauritius and the British Virgin Islands. She had privately confided to a colleague that she was preparing a report to hand over to the National Prosecuting Authority, NPA. Her colleague, who later testified anonymously, said, "She told me she was scared. She said, if they know I've seen the files, I'm done." Days later, Melissa vanished, and hours after her disappearance, her car was found burning on a dirt road near Mulder's Drift. The digital audit that never saw daylight. Months after the trial ended, investigative journalists obtained partial access to Melissa's archived firm email logs. Buried among mundane office memos were attachments labeled Internal Audit, Phase 2, and Tinder Irregularities Report. Each referenced an ongoing internal investigation, one that, according to records, was quietly discontinued after her death. No report was ever published. No disciplinary action was ever taken. And when asked, the firm's spokesperson insisted. No evidence of financial misconduct was found. But the metadata told another story. The files had last been opened and deleted, the morning after Melissa's murder. The secret client. Police records also mention a mysterious client meeting Melissa scheduled 2 days before she was killed. No one at the firm claimed to know who the client was. The meeting was supposed to take place at a restaurant in Santon, yet CCTV showed Melissa waiting alone. 15 minutes later, she received a phone call and immediately left. Her phone pinged off a nearby tower for the last time that night. Authorities later confirmed the caller's number was unregistered, a burner phone, never used again. The power web. When financial crimes experts later mapped the flow of money from the firms Melissa had been investigating. Something alarming appeared. The same entities that had moved millions offshore were also connected to political campaign donors, including those linked to individuals who'd served in Parliament. The implication was chilling. If Melissa had filed that report, she could have exposed one of the biggest political scandals in the country's legal sector. Whether or not that cost her life remains unproven, but for many investigators, the timing was too perfect to ignore. The silence that followed. After her death, multiple employees who'd worked with Melissa suddenly resigned or relocated. One junior associate disappeared overseas without notice. Another, who had reportedly helped her compile documents, refused all interviews, later telling reporters, "You don't understand. It's bigger than anyone knows." Her words echo through online forums and documentaries, turning Melissa's case from a tragic killing into a symbol of institutional silence. Connecting the dots, digital sleuths, data analysts, and even ex-detectives began to connect the threads. Burn car equals destruction of evidence. Missing audit equals financial motive to high-level clients equals political protection. Every piece pointed toward a pattern that didn't start or end with Melissa, but one that might still exist today, operating behind corporate facades and closed courtroom doors. The only thing more dangerous than knowing too much, one investigator said, is knowing just enough to make someone afraid of you. Her legacy. In the years since, Melissa Lewis's story has become a cautionary tale for whistleblowers, a reminder of how truth can be buried beneath power and fear. But in the quiet corners of South Africa's legal world, her name still stirs unease. A woman who may have uncovered the wrong secret and paid the ultimate price. The final verdict, truth or cover-up. In every unsolved story, there comes a moment where the facts stop talking and the silences begin to speak for themselves. Melissa Lewis's murder may have been solved in court, but the truth, the real truth, remains hidden in plain sight. In 2008, after a lengthy and public investigation, her ex-boyfriend and colleague, Colin Edward, was arrested and charged with her murder. The prosecution argued that jealousy, betrayal, and rage drove him to kill Melissa, that he lured her from work, attacked her, and then burned her car to hide the evidence. Witnesses testified to their strained relationship, heated arguments, and his possessiveness. Police presented trace, DNA, and fiber evidence that linked him to the scene. And finally, the prosecution painted the narrative that satisfied the court. Melissa Lewis, a brilliant young lawyer, was the victim of a jealous lover's wrath. The verdict, guilty, life imprisonment. For most, the case was closed. But was it? Not everyone believed justice had truly been served. Forensic experts later raised questions about inconsistencies in the timeline, particularly around the burning of the vehicle and the location of her body. One retired investigator revealed there were gaps, hours unaccounted for. Someone else could have helped, or even acted entirely alone. But the pressure to close the case was immense. The financial motive, the missing audit files, and the burner phone call were never fully explored in court. These details didn't fit neatly into the prosecution's version of events, and so they were quietly left out. The hidden case file. In 2019, more than a decade after her death, a former journalist obtained a leaked portion of the case's secondary file, showing a redacted list of names tied to the financial irregularities Melissa had been reviewing. Among them were several corporate and political figures who had since moved into senior government positions. This leak reignited public interest. If Melissa's death truly stemmed from what she discovered, a potential corruption trail, then her murder might have been a message, not a crime of passion. Yet, no new inquiry was ever opened. The family's silence. Melissa's family, devastated by the ordeal, withdrew from public view. Her parents released only one statement years later. "We will never truly know what happened to our daughter. We can only hope her story keeps others safe." Those words carry both pain and resignation, a quiet acknowledgement that justice, sometimes, is only partial. Her friends remember her as sharp, loyal, and determined to do what was right, even when it came with risk. "She wasn't afraid to speak up," one said. And maybe that's what made her dangerous to the wrong people. Echoes of fear. In South Africa's legal world, Melissa's death still echoes. Whistleblowers who expose corruption often face intimidation, silence, or worse. Some believe her murder was the first public sign of a darker undercurrent, a system willing to sacrifice its own to protect secrets. Several years after her death, South Africa introduced new whistleblower protections, inspired in part by cases like hers. In a way, her tragedy reshaped the country's legal conscience. But the people who needed to answer for her death, they never did. The mystery that lingers. Even now, online investigators and podcasters revisit her case, analyzing photographs, timelines, and court records. Many point out that every key document Melissa handled disappeared the week she died. Others argue the simplest explanation might still be the truth, a jealous man's crime. But if that's true, why was her professional life erased so carefully afterward? Why were her audit files never recovered? And why did every trail she followed vanish right after her death? When truth burns, one podcaster famously said, "Someone always makes sure the ashes are swept away." The unanswered questions. Even after the verdict, we're left with haunting questions. Was Melissa targeted because of love or because of what she knew? Who made that final phone call the night she vanished? And most of all, was her death truly the end of her story, or just the cover page of another? The evidence points both ways, creating a split between those who believe in a personal motive and those convinced of a powerful cover-up. Whichever side you choose, one truth stands. Melissa Lewis died surrounded by fire, and in that blaze, more than one secret was destroyed. Perhaps justice was served, or perhaps the real story was buried with her. Melissa Lewis's case reminds us that truth doesn't always survive the flames. But by remembering her, by questioning what doesn't add up, we keep that truth alive. If you believe every story deserves an ending, don't let this one fade away. Like, share, and subscribe. Your voice keeps these stories from being forgotten, and your curiosity helps bring light to the shadows. They say the fire that night destroyed everything. The car, the evidence, the answers. But not the questions. Those remain. What did Melissa know? Who made that final phone call? And why, all these years later, does the case still feel unfinished? Reflective ending. Some mysteries end in revelation. Others end in silence. This one ends somewhere in between, in the space where truth meets fear and the light never fully reaches. Melissa's story isn't just about death. It's about the things we're not meant to see, the whispers that echo long after the fire dies out, and the courage of one woman who may have uncovered too much. If you believe that curiosity keeps the world honest, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to @MysteryVault80. Your comments and critiques matter here. They help us see what we might have missed, challenge what we think we know, and strengthen this community of seekers who refuse to look away. Because the mystery doesn't end when the video does, it begins with you. Until next time, keep your mind open, your questions sharp, and your light burning.